Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tom Rivera, and I retired from Cal State San Bernardino. And we are at the File Library here at Cal State San Bernardino on the 5th floor. And today is May 30th, and it's approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We are continuing our oral history project of South Colton, and our guest this afternoon is Mr. Joaquin Granado. Joaquin, welcome and thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Well,
And with us also is Mr. Tony Vilches, who retired from Cal State San Bernardino after 39 years of working here at Cal State. And both are residents of South Colton, and they both were raised in South Colton in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. And also, part of our project is behind the camera is Mr. Frank Acosta, who has been doing our camera work now for several presentations. And at the far end of the table, next to Tony, is Mr. Henry Vasquez, and Henry is also part of our committee. Welcome, Henry, and welcome, Frank, and thank you for continuing with our project.
thank you.
First of all, let me get started. I have a set of questions here, and Joaquin, let me start with you. Tell me about when did your dad come to Colton, and why did he come to Colton? You mentioned to me a story the other day that your family went to, was it Michigan?
Michigan.
Michigan, and then tell me from there. What, you were 5 years old or so?
I was 5 years old. Well, first of all, my father was originally born in Texas.
Mhm.
Okay, he moved to Mexico with my grandfather, which was his parents, and then and I was 5 years old when they decided to come to the United States, and we crossed through El Paso. Well, it wasn't just our family; it was other families, but they were related.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they talked them into going to Michigan because they would work in Michigan.
Mhm.
In,
What kind of work?
it was lettuce,
Uh-huh.
cabbage, and so I guess they decided to go to Michigan, and we were there probably maybe half a year, not very long. My brother John, who is the third from me, he was born there in Michigan while we were there. So soon after that, I guess the family that we traveled with decided to come to Colton, so that's how we wound up in Colton.
Oh, I see.
And we got to Colton, I believe it was in 1944, 45, about 45. And we lived in a house with not just our family, but with 2 or 3 other families. So we were pretty crowded in there.
Mm-hmm. How many people were residing in the house? Can you remember?
I'd say,
About 10, 12, 13?
I'd say maybe about 15 of them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then you all came from Michigan to Colton?
Well, some of them were already here.
Okay.
That's how we got there to that house. It was in South Colton.
Uh-huh.
It was pretty much in the corner of Pine and Old Street.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yeah, right, pretty close to where you live.
My barrio.
Yeah.
Las Palomas. My
Yeah,
barrio.
Palomas, yeah. And then from there, we moved around, and we wound up over there on 7th Street and L Street.
7th and L Street?
7th and L.
Uh-huh.
We moved there, we lived there behind another house there, and then we wound up on M Street. We rented out the Lucero family house,
Uh-huh.
and we lived there. We lived in the front house. My grandfather lived in the back with his family, and we lived there for a while. At that time, my father got a job at the PFC, the old ice plant.
Well, the Pacific Fruit Express
Pacific Food
Company.
Express Company.
Yeah, and many of our folks from they lived in South Colton worked for the PFE.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
Pacific Fruit Express. And Tony, your mom and dad, when did they come to Colton?
Well, like I said, my father came to Colton from Mexico in
What part of Mexico, Tony?
from he came de Guanajuato,
Guanajuato,
el estado
okay.
de Guanajuato. So he came to Colton in 1926. He was 22 years old at the time. And my understanding, he followed his older brother who was in Colton already. And why his brother was there already, I don't know, but I know
Yeah.
my father told me he came and followed his brother here. So my mother on the other side, she was born in New Mexico, in Carrizozo, Nuevo Mexico. And her parents came from Mexico. And there were like four of them born in New Mexico. Then because of the railroad
Mhm.
on my mother's side, my grandfather brought those children to Colton.
Oh, so your family from your mom's side
Yeah.
came to Colton because
Of
your,
it.
your grandpa worked with the railroad?
Yeah, he was
Okay.
involved with the railroad, so
Mhm.
he came. And now the rest of my mother's brothers and sisters were all born in Colton,
Mm-hmm.
because there was 11 of them all together.
Uh-huh.
But the first 5 were born in New Mexico,
Uh-huh.
and the rest were all born in Colton.
Now, where did your dad work? Did he also, was he also a railroad worker?
No, my dad never did work. When I can recall, my father always worked construction.
Okay.
He worked out in the streets, doing the paving, doing the blacktop and everything. That I remember.
Mhm.
I remember him taking me to work with him when I was like 7 or 8 years old. We used to go, and he used to take me with him, and that I can remember all those times.
And now, when they came to Colton, did they always live on Fifth Street?
My mother did. Ever since I can remember, my grandfather, where I live now, well, he owned that whole corner. My
The
grandfather.
corner of Fifth and?
Well, he owned the corner on Fifth, and he owned between Birch and Maple. He owned that whole corner. And I get these stories from my uncles, my mother's brothers, that across the street, my grandfather would keep the horses. That's where he kept the horses.
Oh, okay.
And he would get the old lumber, that some of those cars from the PFE, and then he'd bring it home. And then I remember putting us grandchildren together and take out all the nails, and he would sell those. My grandfather was an entrepreneur.
Well, tell me again, your grandfather,
On my mother's side.
on your mom's side,
Yes.
started the business
Yes.
of taking the lumber that was, when they took the box cars apart from the
Exactly.
PFE,
Mhm.
your grandfather would collect that lumber
Yes.
and take it home, clean it up, and put you to work to clean that up.
Right.
And then what happened? He sold it to?
He would sell it, and if even today, if you take some of the old houses in South Colton, you will take off and you will see the board that say PFE on it. And there's still some houses that have that.
So your grandfather
My
was
grandfather.
instrumental in providing building materials
Building material.
for many of the people that
Right.
build their houses in South Colton.
Yeah, and also, as my uncle told him, one of his sons, my uncle used to tell me, he used to sell them wood. You know, in those days, they didn't have gas stoves, they had the old wooden stoves. So he would go, my uncle said, he would send him around, he would take wood, take the wood, maybe whatever they needed once or twice a month or whatever, and then once a month, my uncle said he'd go out and collect his money. So I can recall my grandfather did very well for himself.
Did he have a name for, did people recognize him as a name or a company or the one?
No, just
What was his name?
El Difonso Duran was his name. Yeah.
So call Don Alfonso and he'll get
He'll
you
get
lumber.
you, yes.
So he had that reputation.
Right, I can recall growing up way back in the maybe late 40s, early 50s, I barely remember this. He used to have these big cars, big DeSotos. He loved to have big cars. I can remember they would open like this sideways.
So he had money.
Oh, he had money.
Uh-huh.
I remember one story that my uncle told me. He says one time, he says he called him over. He says, I want to go buy a new car. Okay, and there was a Dodge dealer in Colton at that time, and he had got this bag, brought it over. And they went to see the Dodge dealer, and finally decided, what he wanted, and the salesman said, well, that's going to cost you like $5,000, which was a lot of money in those days. He goes, how do you plan to pay it? Pull out that bag, dump $5,000 right on the table.
That was an expensive car.
Yes, yeah.
So Tony, your family, you still live in the same property
Mhm.
that your grandfather bought in the
Yes.
early years.
Yes.
And he owned pretty much a large piece of that part of Colton
Yes.
on Fifth Street. Like you said, he had his business, his lumber business,
Right.
and he had his horses there,
Yes.
and then he had his whole family there,
Yes, he did, he had a whole
Yeah.
family there.
and you still live there.
And I live there on one corner of it, on Fifth and Maple. Yes, I still live there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you never left the barrio.
I'm still there.
And what barrio is this, Tony?
La Calle Cinco.
La Calle Cinco.
Yeah, yeah.
La Calle- That's where Henry lives too.
Henry lives my neighbor.
Yeah.
Henry's my neighbor.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
So, and Joaquin, your dad, when he came here from Michigan, not Michigan, was it Michigan?
He was born in Texas, he moved to Mexico, where I was born, and my other brother Frank was born. And then from there, we traveled to Michigan.
And then to Colton.
Yeah.
Now, where did your father work?
The Pacific Food Express,
At the PFE?
PFE. yeah.
PFE.
And, yeah, he was there until he died. He died at the age of 33.
Oh, he was a young
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
15, 16 when he passed away.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
When he left, when he died, there was 8 of us. And then my mother remarried, and then 3 more. So we're a total of 11.
11 altogether?
Yeah.
How did your mother do it?
Well, you know, my dad, because he paid into Social Security at the time, I guess it's fairly new, she was collecting, I guess, $200 a month from Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the summer, we, as kids, we used to go out and work, you know, and whatever we earned, well.
And you mentioned, Joaquin, at our earlier conversation, when I asked you, how did your mom do it? You mentioned, well, Social Security was one way, but also you mentioned that the city would announce when they would provide
Food commodities, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, there was a truck that came around like once a month, and the time that I remember, they always stationed themselves, the truck at Veterans Park. And
Veterans Park would be at the corner of Pine and O Street.
Pine and O
in
Street,
South
yeah.
Colton.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so as soon as we got word, we'd go and stand in line, okay? Like a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
And there's where we got some of our commodities.
What kind of commodities did they provide?
Small bags of flour,
Mhm.
small bags of beans,
Mm-hmm.
your sugar and butter, just a handful of food commodities, and that would help us carry through, through till the following month,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But it was hard. It was hard on my mom, but we managed
Mhm.
somehow. We managed,
Mhm.
and because
And you were the oldest?
I was the oldest. Yeah, I was the oldest, and we lived in this house where it was the living room, the kitchen, and the kitchen was kind of large, but it was and a small living room,
Mhm.
like 10 by 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bedroom was pretty much the same size. And
Did you have any? Were they all boys or all or?
Well, there was 5 boys, and we all slept in one bed.
Uh-huh.
The girls, they slept with my mom, which my dad turned into an old garage. He moved it closer to the house. He made a bedroom out of it. That's where my mom and the girls used to sleep. So.
Now, I asked you, Joaquin, your mom must have been quite a person to be able to support, take care of all the 11 children that she had. She must have been quite a person. And, but food, Joaquin, 11 kids go through a dozen of eggs every morning.
Well, my mother was uneducated. She didn't speak English at all. So it was very difficult. So after a while, well, she got in the what is now welfare program, and they would help her out with some food.
Mhm.
And so that's how we managed.
Okay.
So when I was old enough to where I could go out and work in high school, before that we used to go out and work in the field with my grandfather.
Mhm.
That's how we earned some summer money. But during school, I would take off like maybe 2 days off of school to go work. My friend Henry Matos,
Mhm.
his father worked at the slaughterhouse over there in High Grove.
Mhm.
And they were pretty much in the same situation that we were.
Well, I
Very
think a
poor.
lot of people in
Yeah.
Colton, Tony, were in the same situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he asked us if we wanted to work twice a week, 2 days out of the week, $1.50 an hour. And what we did is we used to load cow hides onto the railroad cars. And that's how we made.
What days were those that you worked, Joaquin?
There was Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
Sometimes only Wednesdays because there wasn't enough work.
Yeah.
But Wednesdays and Thursdays were
Were days that you worked?
that we worked. Yeah.
What year were you in high school?
That was 58 and 59. And in 59, Mr. Quinones was one of my teachers. He talked to me and told me, if you keep missing this much school, you're getting behind in your work, you're not going to graduate. So I said, well, I told him what the situation was. So he went and talked to my mom.
Mhm.
He went and talked to my mom and told her what the situation was. So my mom said, you better keep going, until you graduate. So I quit going to work until I graduated from high school. And that was pretty much it. I didn't continue my education because all I wanted to do was just finish school and get a job.
Get a job and help your mom
Start
and
working,
also
yeah.
Provide for yourself.
Yeah.
Tony, your grandfather, you mentioned that he sold lumber to many of the residents in Colton. I remember you mentioned that we would build with those boxcar materials, we would build houses. And the house that we built, Tony, was kind of like one room at a time, ¿verdad?
Right.
You build one room, and then you wait, save for another batch of lumber, then you build another room, and then it would be kind of a straight line of almost boxes of rooms that people would build, ¿verdad?
Correct.
Yeah, and you're right, if people would take down some of those houses, they would see PFE on the side of those boards.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Tell me about your situation, Tony. You said you were born and raised on Fifth Street, and you mentioned also that growing up in Fifth Street, there was a sequía, kind of a water canal that was passing through your area, and you guys took that over as a playground.
Yes, we did. That was our swimming pool. It's still there. They covered over it, but it used to be right back of our house. Because right back of our house, there's the tracks that used to go to the cement plant. At those days when the cement plant was going good, there are some tracks that go right back there, and they used to go into the cement plant. They used to load the cement on the train, and then they'd haul it out. Not only
Oh, that's what the tracks are for. I
Yeah,
always
that-
wondered what the tracks were for.
That's what they hauled the cement out of.
Oh, I see.
But the sequía was.
Because
there.
you lived almost maybe a block away from the cement plant.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's that big field which is Rancho now, and all those buildings there, but at that time it was just a big empty field.
Uh-huh.
And the sequía was a lot closer to us, so we just went behind there. We would dam it up, put some boards on the side, water would go up, and that's where we go swimming. That was our pool. So, some of my cousins that lived there, and some of my friends there, that's what we used for swimming.
That was your whole playground.
That was
Your
that
whole
was part of our
playground.
playground. Yes,
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, so one thing I remember that our house originally was wood. Okay, it was wood, and it burned down. And I can tell you the exact date it burned because it happened on the 16th of September.
Mhm.
We were over there at the fiesta. over there on N Street,
Yes,
okay? And we were over there, and that was in 1950.
there was a Fiestas
And the
Patrias,
Fiestas Patrias.
September 16th,
Yep. 1950.
liberation from Mexico from Spain.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we were over there, and then somebody else, there's a house burning down like Calle Cinco. So when we got there, it was our house. And so it burned, it pretty well burned to the ground. And so then we had to go live with my aunt, my mother's sister, who lived around the corner on Walnut. And we lived there for a while till my father he rebuilt the house. But this time he built it with bricks. And what my father did, he worked, like I said, construction. And that kind of work, you don't always work. There was periods where he got laid off. And he learned how to be a plumber. So when he wasn't working, he would do plumbing jobs. And he would take me with him.
Mm.
I hated that. I never did like
Why?
that. I just didn't like that. I mean, I learned how to do it but I just didn't like that. And he thought I would follow in that, but I didn't like that, you know? And so, that's why in those periods when he wasn't working, well, you know, he could make money to keep the family going, you know, by doing that.
And you mentioned that your house was built out of cinder blocks.
Yes.
Blocks. And who was the person that was a mason that built?
Oh, Jose Castro, you know?
Tell me about Jose Castro.
Okay.
So Jose Castro, I know, was my neighbor,
Yes.
and he was a great mason.
He was, there were all different kinds of people there in South Colton who had different trades.
Mhm.
Like my father was a plumber, Castro he was a mason, we had other Chalillo.
Mhm.
Chalillo was a carpenter.
Who was Chanillo?
Chalillo, I don't know, I forgot what his real name was,
Uh-huh.
but he was another person that was in South Colton, and he was a carpenter by trade. So if one family needed something, they would all go over there and help him out.
Uh-huh.
And we never charged him anything, you know? Only that person would provide the materials. And then next time somebody else needed something, they would go over to their
I
house.
remember my dad used to be part of that
Okay.
group because he did the curb and gutter and sidewalks
okay.
and patios.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There were a lot of people that had were specialists in different
They
trades.
were. Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Well, like I said, Jose Castro was was called maestro. We call him maestro.
Maestro, yeah.
We call him maestro. I know
Yeah, I
the
remember.
correct word is maestro, but everybody maestro. That's the way they phrased it. But he was a great mason, and he's got that as you come into South Colton, there in front of a Voight store, that big monument that's there.
Oh, the Welcome to Colton
Yeah,
Monument.
he built that one.
Oh, he built that?
He built that one.
That's on O Street and La Cadena.
Oh, in La Cadena, he built
Uh-huh,
that,
uh-huh.
he made that. And then in 1964, when I got married and having a house built, and he came over and he looked and he goes, diles que no hagan con esa pared, don't do anything with that wall. Why? I'm gonna build you a fireplace. What? I'm gonna build you a fireplace. He did. He built me a fireplace. It's still standing. It's still standing today. It looks like it was built maybe 10 years ago. It's still, all the brickwork that's outside of my house, I have brickwork, he did all of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, Tony, did you have any brothers and sisters?
No,
You didn't?
no, I'm an only child. Yep, I'm an only child, I know. I know, as everybody talks around here about, they came from families, maybe a small family was 4 or 5 kids, but most of them were 8 or 9 or 10. Well, that didn't happen with me. My mother married later in life with her because my mother was second to the oldest, and her mother died young. In fact, my grandmother died in 1929 of a ruptured appendix. And so that left my mother and her older sister to take care of her 2 younger brothers that were left there. Her 2 younger brothers were like 4 and 6. So my mother didn't marry, she was like 28, and I wasn't born till she was 34, okay? Which was very rare.
Very.
Very rare
Yeah.
in those days. By the time you were 15, you were married.
Yeah.
Between 15 and 18, after 18, a girl was considered an old maid. But my mother had to stay home to take care of her brothers, her brother and sister, because they were like 4 and 6 when my grandmother died.
So you were spoiled.
Very much so. Everybody tells me I was. And like I said, yes. I always say my father provided for my mother and me everything we needed and a lot of things we wanted.
Uh-huh.
Because we were the only, you only had to provide for me and my mother.
And your grandfather had a thriving business.
And he had a thriving business, so,
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, that's, well, I was the only one. And, but I have, like, some of my mother's brothers and sisters, they had like 7 kids, 9 kids, 5 kids, everybody else.
Yeah.
Except for one uncle. He never had any children at all. One of my mother's brothers never had any children at all.
Well, tell us about you growing up in La Calle Cinco, the barrio La Calle Cinco. Who were your friends there?
My friends were basically, a lot of my cousins lived around there. And they were basically, I have a lot of cousins who were my age. So basically, in fact, right there on, like I said, where my grandfather's property was, on the other corner on Birch, my other uncle lived there, my other grandfather's son, and he had 9 children, so I had 9 cousins there. And I had quite a few who were my age, so this is where I hung around with them.
Mhm.
This is growing up.
Mm-hmm. Were you familiar with, what was the name of the dairy at the end of 5th Street?
Long's Dairy.
Long's Dairy.
George Long. Yes,
Okay.
George Long. Long's Dairy. Yes. We used to go down there and get their milk from him.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's past right there where Caldera had his swimming pool.
Oh, Caldera swimming pool. Tell me
Yes.
about that.
Well, I don't remember when it was going, because I guess when I remember it, it was already abandoned, and now of course it's all gone.
Uh-huh.
But they tell me that back down there on Fog and 5th,
Mm-hmm.
they had the pool there, because it was hard to get into the Colton Plunge, it was hard to go on the other side of it.
Right.
So we did our own swimming pool, and I understand that they had a bull ring over there, and they used to have dances, tardeadas and everything.
Mm.
Now, this was before my time, I don't remember any of this. But
They also said that they had a baseball field.
a baseball field too? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's what they tell me.
There.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But you just didn't experience that
No,
because
no.
you were too young.
You were too young. This
Yeah.
must have happened probably I would say in the 30s and maybe into the 40s.
Uh-huh.
I was born in 42, so
Uh-huh.
so I wouldn't remember all this.
Yeah. And Joaquin, your friends, tell us about, you had a club that you belonged to. Tell us about your club, and when did it start? Who were the members of your club that started how did it start?
Well, I used to hang around with close friends. We kind of grew up together. Frank Bustos from the
Yes.
Bustos family, Jimmy Barra, and Trini Hernandez. We used to hang around quite a bit together. We used to walk all over Colton. And my brother Frank was.
Did you drive?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Okay, I could drive, but I didn't have a car to
Okay.
drive yet. Okay, I didn't drive until after my father passed away. What I meant, really drive. Okay,
Mhm.
when we had our 8th grade graduation, remember we had our separate from the other kids from the junior high. The Sardinias had the dance.
Oh, tell me about that. I've heard about the Saldana family. They lived on Maple Street.
Maples.
And then they were very, very generous with their house.
Yes.
That they would provide, like you said, graduation. And when your class graduated
From junior high?
from Colton Junior High
Mhm.
School, you participated in the graduation in Colton Junior High School.
Yes.
And then you came and did your own Chicano Mexican graduation at the Saldana house.
Mhm, yes.
Okay, tell me
And
about that.
that was the first time I drove my car, which I just started to learn. And I invited this girl, Christine Chavez. I
Mhm.
think you might
Yes,
have known her.
yeah.
Okay. And she was surprised that I showed up in the car by myself, because in junior high at that time, who drives around, you know?
Yeah.
So that was the first time I drove. I drove from there to the Sardanias, you know, but anyway, by that time I already knew Frankie and Jimmy and Trini, we used to call him Tati. And my brother Frank used to hang around with these other kids that were organizing a club known as the Condors. You know? So one day, my brother Frank told me, he says, the guys want to know if you want to join with us.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I don't know, you know, but we'll go. So the four of us went over there to see, just to talk and see what, but we wound up joining the club, okay? And during that time, they were trying to find a name, which they had come down with the Condors. But when we joined, they wanted a different change. Well, what do you think? Well, I remember when Ernie Kulunga and you used to hang around with Ernie and those guys. And at that time, I had just started hanging around with you guys, okay? And I remember the drawing that Ernie came up with a conquistador, half butt showing and the lance all. I thought that was a neat.
So Ernie did the logo for you guys.
Ernie did the logo. So I suggested to the guys, there's an emblem that I've seen, and I want you to look at it and see what you think. Okay. So we asked Ernie if we could see it, you know, and he showed it to us, and then we wound up asking, can we use your logo? Sure. Mm-hmm. So we wound up naming our club Conquistadores.
So that's when the Conquistadores
That's when
were
we
organized,
Yeah.
organized, okay.
Yeah. And
Do you remember who the members of your club was during that initial period?
yes, it was Richard Rivas.
Richard Rivas.
Richard Rivas, Henry Matos, Johnny Hernandez from the Hernandez family there, and Manuel Colunga,
Mhm.
Denny Luna.
Mhm.
Those are big families.
Mhm.
And so there was about maybe 10, 15 kids, and then us.
So it was kind of a friends getting together,
Yeah,
and then other friends bringing other friends to the club.
right.
And it was kind of a social getting together kind of activity.
Yeah, because we used to play a lot of baseball in the street.
Okay.
Okay, that's how we get.
Sports was part of it too.
Yeah, we got together and played a lot of baseball down on the street, and then afterwards we started going over to the. I don't know if you ever got involved with playing baseball on that lot right next to the railroad tracks,
Mhm.
across the street from the laundry on
Yes.
7th and K.
Yes.
There was a laundry there. Across the street
Yeah.
there was an empty field
Right,
where Father Luki
right.
at the time was still in high school.
Mhm.
Mario Arroyo
Mhm.
and Freddie Chavez, Nica.
Mhm.
They were getting us together and go play ball over there.
They were the older guys.
They were the older guys.
And they were kind of just directing you
Yeah.
guys, okay.
Yeah. So that's how we knew each other. So anyway, we decided let's get together and you know play sport with other towns.
Mhm.
So that's how we got started. That's what we started doing,
Uh-huh.
playing sports against other cities.
Mhm.
And but you know, you start wearing a jacket with an emblem,
The colors,
the colors, then people start coming at you. You know,
yeah.
and
So you were a gang,
we were then considered a gang,
not a club.
not a club
afterwards.
anymore.
Okay.
So we had to contend not only from other cities, from within our own town, because there was maybe 5 or 6 other groups. There were
There were also clubs.
gangs,
Okay.
clubs, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's how you know you
So what year was that when you started working?
this was in 1958 when we finally were
Okay.
a club.
So late 50s, eh?
Late 50s, and then through the time when I graduated, once I graduated, I kind of started thinking about other things. In fact, I met my wife right in the middle of, almost at the end of 58. So when she was a freshman in high school, I was already a senior.
Mhm.
And so when I graduated, I started thinking about other things. What am I going to do in the future? So the guys that were in the club, we were graduating one right after another.
Yeah, you mentioned that, that you were just, your motivation and your goal was to graduate from high school?
Yes.
Okay, and that's why you left that part-time job.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that you wanted to get a job right away. What kind of work did you get after high school, Joaquin?
Well, at that time, you go after anything that's available. So I started working at this auto body fender shop that Henry Mendoza used to run.
There was a corner of La Cadena and M Street, okay?
And M Street.
Mhm.
So I worked there for maybe a year.
Mhm.
And then soon after that, my girlfriend at that, which is now my wife, her uncle asked me if I wanted to work with him at Mayan Foods, which was a food
What was his
processing.
name? What was his name?
His name was Benny Urquiza.
Oh.
Okay, he had been there since, I don't know.
So they worked at
Early
Mayan, you
50s.
worked at Mayan then?
I worked at Mayan,
which was the
yeah, from 60.
pickle factory.
Yes, they made mayonnaise, mustard, and pickles, and then they also used to supply the lounges with bar supplies. So anyway, I worked there for till about 66, 67, and then I left because I was talking to this friend of mine, Ray Hernandez. He worked at Dun & Bush, which is air conditioning and refrigeration place. And we just got to talking about it, and I said, you know what, I'm looking for another job that pays a little more. So that's when he told me that, why don't you come over to where I work, and you can get one there. He said, ask for Eddie Cortez. Eddie Cortez was raised in a barrio,
He was raised in Beverly Hills, huh?
Yeah.
Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills.
So Eddie managed to get me a job there, and I worked there till 69, because at that time we got word they were going to close down the plant. They're moving to Virginia. So I said, well, this is no good. I've only been here a couple of years. So anyway, I started looking for a job, and within a week I found a job with a cement plant.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you at the cement plant?
I was there 18 years.
18 years?
Yeah, I worked 10 years as a laborer, 5 as labor, and then 5 as what you call a powderman.
Mhm.
Is you load part of the mountain with charged dynamite so they can get the lime rock out of there. So that's what I started doing, and then I was asked if I wanted to be part of which they were starting a safety department, okay, which they didn't really have a safety department. So the person, Frank D'Orsi, who came in to take over the department, in fact, he took over the department for California, Portland, and our sister plants in Mojave Desert, in Mojave, and then in Relito, Arizona. So he was in charge of 3 plants. So he asked me if I would. I said, why not? So I got training through him, and then I attended community colleges to pertain to my job, what I needed to learn, and I did that for 8 years, which is very rewarding. I learned a lot, quite a bit, not only from Frank, but from the work that was done as far as on the management side.
And how did you get involved with a job in Colton, city of Colton? Was it also one of your friends mentioned, or? You said they had a big layoff at the cement
Yes,
plant.
because I was the newest one in the department, in the safety department, I was laid off. And I was off for about 3 months, and then the plant manager asked me, you know, why don't you come back? So why not? You know? During that time I was off, I was working all over the place. I worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory installing windows for the buildings there with a contractor from Ontario. And rather than driving way over there, I'm only 5 minutes away from the plant. Sure, why not? So I went back and I worked there for about 6 months, and I said, you know what? I think it's. I was already considering leaving when this friend of mine that I work with, he said, you know what? They're taking applications for the city of Colton. So I went and put one in.
And you got hired?
Took the
Which
test.
department?
Took the test, and at that time they were looking for personnel in the water department and building maintenance and what they call parks department. So I got hired in the water department.
And you were there for how long?
I was there for 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years, and you retired when? When did you retire?
I retired in 2003.
You retired
I
young?
retired, yeah.
No tiene vergüenza, ¿verdad? You retired young? And Tony, you didn't like being a plumber.
No.
And you didn't like being a lumber guy.
No,
And you didn't like, I don't know what else you didn't like,
No.
but did you belong to any of the clubs, Tony? Who was
No.
your best friend there?
okay, no, I never did belong to the club, but my best friend in high school was Jimmy Alanis. Jimmy and I,
Where did Jimmy live?
he lived on 4th Street.
Fourth and,
Fourth between K and L.
okay.
Yeah, and so,
La Reserva.
no, up here, yeah, no, up here on 4th.
Almost Beverly Hills.
Almost,
Oh, no,
almost Beverly Hills, almost
okay.
Beverly Hills, okay? And so I met Jimmy in junior high, because that's when, as I said, I went to school in South Colton. I went to Garfield. I went kindergarten and first grade to Garfield. But because I lived on this side of the tracks.
On Fifth Street.
On Fifth, to go to Garfield, you had to cross the tracks.
I see.
So my mother didn't like that. At that time, San Salvador School, down at the end of Congress, that opened up. So from second grade to sixth grade, I was over here at San Salvador.
So el consentido couldn't pass the railroad tracks.
No, I mean, there were some couple of people who got killed there. A couple of
Yes, I
kids.
remember, yeah.
But, yeah, so that's where I went to school. Boy, but then when I went to junior high, Colton Junior High, in 1957, whoa, what a rude awakening, yeah? That was totally different.
Why was it a rude
Well,
awakening?
because again, you got to be with the Americanos, and you weren't used to being with them, and they weren't used to being with you, and so it took a while. I assimilated in there pretty good. I didn't have problems. I know other people from South Colton didn't like that. They had trouble assimilating.
Yeah.
They're from there, we're from here, and
Yeah, because we integrated in 53, and is that okay? Got it?
Yeah.
I should have been like the priest and said, put down your, put off your phones. Anyway, we integrated the junior high school, Wilson Junior High School, and Roosevelt Junior High School in 53. I remember being part of that class. But your experiences was still kind of a little leery, kind of
yeah, very apprehensive, because I didn't think I was going to make it, and I did. I was able to assimilate and get through it. I had no
Now,
problem.
did they bus you to the junior high school?
Yes.
Where did you pick up the bus?
On 4th Street.
Fourth and,
About 4th and L. About 4th and L.
oh, so you had to walk about 3 blocks?
Yeah, we had to walk up there, and then
Uh-huh.
I would, there was Jimmy Alanis, my friend, he was there, so I would pick him up, and then we'd go pick up the bus, and we'd go to Colton Junior High. So he was my real good friend, right through high school. We all hung around together. And Jimmy and I, we hung around together, but we didn't hang around here in Colton, or we didn't come to San Bernardino. That was no. We used to hang around in Riverside. That was our stomping ground. Yeah, out there at Fairmount Park, and on Sundays you cruise around see all the girls over there, Go see the war tank over there at the end of the lake. It's still there, by the way.
Uh-huh,
War tank is still there.
uh-huh.
And so this is where, and Frankie Bustos, Frankie Bustos had that old Model A.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to go in that one, we used to cruise around in that. Yeah, so that's who I hang around. But I never did join any of the clubs.
Uh-huh.
No, I never did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And after high school, Tony, again, I have to remind you, you didn't want to be a
No,
plumber.
no. I didn't want to. I went to Valley College for a couple of years, but I didn't graduate. And then I got a job over at Kennedy Pontiac in Riverside, just doing general maintenance there. And then I met this girl in Riverside, so.
Alice, your
Alice,
wife.
yeah, Alice,
Alice,
my
your wife.
Yeah, and so we were gonna get married, so I got me a job over at Rohr Industries. They're aircraft subcontractors over in Arlington Avenue. So I got me a job over there and then we got married. And I thought I had it made over at Rohr, it was a good job.
Mhm.
The only problem is, after 5 years, their contracts ran out, so got laid off. And so after that, I went to work for the county of Riverside for about 3 years. I worked for Corona Municipal Court. See, I was working in the office, so the office I love. Find a desk, that's fine. Okay, so I worked for Corona Municipal Court, and I was one of the deputy court clerks with the people came to pay their fines and everything, their tickets, so we would take their money and everything. And I was there for about 3 years, and then Rohr called me back. And said, oh no, my old boss said, wow, this time we're gonna do good. Well, like a dummy, I quit my job. And then I went to work, back to Rohr. Well, it lasted less than a year, then here we go, get into the layoffs. So I'd work a month and get laid off, and work a month, laid off, and finally, this job became available.
Oh, here at Cal State.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even know where Cal State was.
When did you start here at Cal State?
1976.
76?
1976. In fact, my friend Jimmy told me about this job. He was working for the state at the time.
Jimmy Alanis?
Jimmy Alanis. He was working for the state, and he knew I was out of a job, and he saw the posting down there at his office, and he said, there's this job, it's in your alley. He said, why don't you go, where is this? It's Cal State. Where's Cal State? I don't know, I think it's in the mountains somewhere. I said, okay, so I found it. I came up here, and they interviewed me. I remember them interviewing me, and I said, well, I guess that's it. But I didn't know anybody here. And about a week later, they called me and offered me the job.
And you were here for how long?
30 years.
And we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, 2015.
That's right, because it opened in 1965.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So then, like I said, I put in 30 years, and this is where I retired from,
Yeah.
in this building. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to ask you, because I was kind of intrigued by your club, number one, and number two, the connections that you made with the club. That people would tell you about things that were, jobs that were out there, the recommendations that they made for you, or just the word that got to you that there was a job opening someplace in this place. Joaquin, do you still keep in touch with the guys?
I do. In fact, for most of them, because a lot of them have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But I still keep in touch with them. And the guys come from where they came from.
From Colton, yeah.
From Colton, they did pretty well for themselves.
In spite of the fact
spite,
that the discrimination, the isolation, the poverty.
Yeah.
Poverty. And many people say that our schools were not good, but they were pretty good.
They were good. After we got acclimated to the families surrounding and the school and the kids and the teachers, it turned out pretty good.
Even in spite, Tony,
Yeah.
the fact that they didn't let us speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd get whipped if we spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons they did that was because, see, they were all Anglo teachers, so they didn't understand Spanish, so it made it hard on them.
Yeah.
Okay, but basically, I had very good experiences with all my teachers. They were all Anglo teachers. During my elementary school and even in junior high. I can recall way back in maybe the second or third grade, I'm left-handed, okay? I'm left-handed. And you know, in Mexican culture, being left-handed is not a good thing. That's a sinister thing. And my father didn't like that, you know?
Yeah, I remember.
So,
that.
yeah, so I remember when the teacher parents conference came and he told the teacher, you know, he's left-handed. Don't you think we need to tie his left hand? That's what they used to do. You used to tie your left hand so you would learn to write with your right hand, you know? And she told him, you leave him alone. That's the way God made him, and you just leave him alone. I'll never forget that.
What grade was this?
That's about third grade.
Ah,
And he did, he
Yeah.
did.
yeah.
He never said anything but went by.
So they did you a favor back then?
They did. Mrs. Butterfield, I remember that teacher with my.
What's her
third
name?
grade, Mrs. Butterfield.
Mhm.
I still remember her.
Mhm.
She was an older lady. She was already an older lady at the time. But she's one of the teachers that I can remember fondly in going, you know, at San Salvador when I was
Yeah.
there.
And Joaquin, back to your friends, you still keep in touch with them? And I learned recently through Richard Rivas. Richard
Mhm.
Rivas and I were good friends. We were in the same class. 2-3 years ago, you got the Conquistadores together again, and you activated them and what you're doing now. Tell us about the projects that you're doing now.
Well, we decided that let's have a reunion, 58, from 50, guys from the 58 era. And it was 2008, and it was late 2007 when they said, why don't we get together and have a reunion? And so I said, that sounds good, you know. So we started working on it, and then by the time we collected all the members that were in the club at one time, well, there was from our era, our 58, all the way up to 74, I believe. And, well, what are we gonna do? Well, let's have a dance. When we put together a dance for the club members and have their wives. Well, somebody got the idea, well, why don't we put up tickets and sell tickets? And that way we can, you know, get money and then whatever we get, we give it away, you know. Okay, so we decided to do that, and we filled up the American Legion Hall with.
What year was that?
This was 2008.
Okay.
In April of 2008. It only holds 200 people. Well, we had over 300 people. We still have people wanting to come in, and we can't because it only holds so many. So it turned out such a success that everybody said, well, this is better than a high school reunion. When we have another one. So we had another one the following year, and it turned out pretty good. Well, there was this lady there that worked for the National Orange Show, and she talked to us and said, why don't you have your next dance at the Orange Show, at the Renaissance? So we talked about it and said, well, we really can't afford it. Well, tell you what, we'll let you have the hall, and you pay for security, and if you're gonna have food, you pay for food. And that's it. So we decided, well, let's give it a try. Well, we had 500 people. We filled up the Renaissance, and that went on for about 3 years, and then finally the lady was taken off from her project. So it was going to cost us more than what we could afford. So we decided to go ahead and have it at the Sombrero, which is all stomping grounds for a lot of our.
The Sombrero is in South Colton.
South Colton.
It's on 7th Street.
7th Street, and there's where a lot of the entertainment used to be early in the years.
Well-
There's was a place to be.
Well, they used to call it the Broadway of South Colton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, whatever money, and we have other fundraisers. In fact, we have a Jack and Jill golf tournament each year, which is for couples that want to join, and whatever proceeds we get from there, that goes to our scholarship fund.
So you have a scholarship.
We give scholarships to kids that don't have that high GPA, but they want to go to a community college or a trade school.
Mhm.
We help them out with a little bit of money.
Now, where do these kids come from?
They come from the
Are they
Unified School District, Colton Unified.
Oh,
School
they're
District.
Colton High School students?
Yeah.
Okay.
Though we welcome anybody that is in need, regardless of the race. It's in need a little bit of money. We have a scholarship application that we give them, and it's they have to get their transcript from the high school, make sure that they have no lower than a 2.0 GPA. And we
So
have.
it's open for students that are 2.0 students,
Yes,
want to continue studying whatever field or trade that
Mhm.
that they're interested in, and you contact the high school, and do they identify some of the students that you would like to interview?
well, we start doing that, but when we talk to them and told them, we would, like to have some of those students, see if we can, we can offer a small scholarship to them.
So now your organization, you had a big fundraiser recently at the Sombrero,
Mhm. Yes,
and you had about 600 people there?
yeah, well, we had about, pretty close to 500, but had about 480.
And then those funds that you collect, you use for scholarship for students from Colton High School.
Well, our golf tournament is strictly for the scholarships, and which we collect, we make about maybe 2,000, and from there we give out scholarship.
Okay.
The dances that we have, the money we get from there and other fundraisers, we help war veterans, whenever they need clothes, a meal, or just some of them has contacted us helping them out with a month's rent, so we help them out with a month's rent. Anything that we can contribute to help them. We also contribute money to youth organizations, sports, softball, soccer.
Okay.
Even to high school students, if they don't have enough money to go to, for example, a seminar that pertains to their part of their resume whenever they graduate. So we sometimes donate money to them so they can have enough money to go. At Christmas, Thanksgiving, we buy Christmas baskets for 10 people, and we give them out and take them to their homes. And
Wonderful.
And those are some of the
So
things
you
that we.
become an organization that has given lots back to the community.
Yes, because when we were young, you remember, there were people that helped us along the way. So this is our way to kind of thank them for the help that they gave us at the time. There was this family that moved from Texas to California. They moved to Paris, and they were homeless. And there was 5 of them. The oldest was 12 years old, and they were looking for a home. And anyway, somebody found a trailer for them to live in. My daughter, Eleanor, is a registered nurse who works for Riverside Community. Heard about the family, and they invited the family to one of their Christmas, and they provided clothes, toys, food, and money for the. And we were asked if we would help contribute. So we talked to them and said, why not? They're in need. So we donated some money. Some of the committee members bought clothes and donated clothes for them, and some of them donated bicycles for them. And so that's just one of those.
One of the many activities that you do.
Yes.
So your organization has seems to become a charitable organization for the community,
Yeah.
where you provide not only funds, but also food
Food.
and some of the shelter for some of the people that need from the community. But
Yes.
tell me about the guys that back then, you know, you were a club, a gang, quote unquote gang. How are those guys doing now? How did they do? How are they doing?
Well, Richard Rivas, I mentioned, he became a very well insurance agent.
Okay.
And when he retired, they moved to Albuquerque, Las Cruces.
Right.
Okay, and he bought himself a 2-acre place up there, and he loved it.
Yeah. What about the other guys? Some of the other guys that were your
Johnny Hernandez, he became a physical therapist.
Okay.
Manuel Delgado, he worked for the city schools
Okay.
as their air conditioner
Mhm.
man. And Cedric Canales became a successful lawyer.
Mhm.
So they became successful in their own right, in their own particular
Mhm.
field. And,
So growing up in Colton and being part of the everyday experiences that we went through in the barrio provided the foundation for many of these guys to be successful.
well, you know, in spite of everything that was
Yes.
going on, you know,
Yes.
their families kind of kept a close eye on them. And I remember being called in by 2 or 3 of the parents from some of the guys that were in the organization. And they asked me, you know, I know, you know, they want to be in the club, but there's dangers without. Just do us a favor and just keep an eye,
Mhm.
you know, keep an eye, just watch them, you know.
Mhm.
So, and that's the older, like Richard, myself, Henry, we were the oldest ones, and we tried to kind of, you know, sort of guide them along, you know. We talked to the parents, you know, we'll do whatever we can to, you know. And of course, you know, you try, but it doesn't always work out.
Well, but it seems that most of them became outstanding contributing citizens of
They-
our community.
They did.
Yeah.
A lot of them, right after graduation, they either got married, they went into the service,
Mhm.
or went into a field where they thought school.
Right. Talking
Get
about
them-
marriages, Tony. Talking about marriages, you married Alice, and what year was that?
1964.
And you were how old?
I was 22.
You were a young guy.
I was just out of the crib.
Yeah, and tell me, you and Alice raised a family. How many kids did you have?
2,
Boy or girl?
boy and a girl.
Uh-huh. And your daughter is teaching?
My daughter graduated from here at Cal State,
Uh-huh.
and she's got a job with the Colton Unified School District as a
Uh-huh.
teacher. She's been there. She's taught there for 25 years.
And your son?
My son works for the County of San Bernardino. He works for the 911 emergency dispatch, like when you call 911.
Yes.
He's one of the people who answers the phones.
Hmm.
Yeah. He's been there about 15 years with the County of San Bernardino.
Boy, that's a tough job.
Yeah, it is.
It's a tough job.
What he told me was the toughest call he got. One time, this man called, he was frantic. He said, my wife, she wants to commit suicide. He's got to get the police down there. Next thing, I heard a shot, and I heard the body hit the ground.
Oh,
He says, that is the hardest call I ever got.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Mhm. Also, Tony, you were kind of a religious kind of guy. You went to church every Sunday.
still do.
You still do?
Still do. Yes.
Good Catholic?
Good Catholic.
And you go to church in South Colton?
San Salvador,
And it's located on
7th and L.
7th and L. And tell me, since a little kid, you first communion,
Yeah.
confirmation.
I did my first communion there, my my confirmation. Married there because when we got married, the tradition was that you had to get married in the parish of the bride.
Uh-huh.
Well, Alice was from Riverside,
Uh-huh.
so we got married at Our Lady of Guadalupe Shrine in Riverside.
Uh-huh. Tell me about Father Lukey.
Father Lucky, huh?
Tell me about him.
He was a very good speaker, he could draw people to you. He was.
When was he the priest at the church?
He's the one, Father Lucky, you remember the old wooden church?
Yes.
And then now we have this new one, the new
Yes,
building?
yes.
Well, he's the one that got all that done. He was able to, that time they didn't have such oversight as the diocese does now. We were part of the diocese of San Diego. So he managed to get some money and knock the old one down and was able to build this new one. And that was in 1975, 76. And I think we moved in there in 1977.
And Father Lukey was a Colton boy.
Colton boy, right? He was born and raised right across the street from the church. Yeah.
Did he get permission to build that new church?
Not really. Not really.
So he had the Colton attitude.
Yeah. If it needs to get done, let's get it done. But yeah, I've been.
Besides building the church,
Mhm.
what else about Father Lukey? You said that he was a very good person that brought people in.
Yes, yes, he was. Yes, I did. He was older than I was. Okay, so he was older. I really didn't know him as growing up, but I did get to know him when he was a priest. Him and we had the other Colton boy that became a priest, Father Ray Rosales.
Oh, that's right.
Father Ray.
Tell me about Father Ray.
Father
He was
Ray.
your age, wasn't he? No, he was younger.
He was younger. He was younger than me. Father Ray was more of a traditional, old-style priest, okay, which is kind of hard to imagine because he was younger, but he was in the old style, and two different contrasts. But Father Ray was very dedicated to the church, and he died at a fairly young age. He was like in his late 50s when he died, and that's been about 5 years ago.
I completely forgot about Father Ray. Thank you for reminding
Yeah,
me.
Father Ray
How
Rosales.
about Father Valencia?
Oh, I remember him. Oh, we remember him.
You do, Joaquin.
Yeah.
Joaquin remembers him. He was there at the parish from about what, in the 30s?
1937 to 67 almost. Yeah.
Till 60, yeah, when he.
66, he died in the accident, yeah.
Well, in fact, he had just gone by my house because his sister lived down there on Agua Mansa, just past Rancho. And he used to go down to see her just about every day or every other day. And one thing about Father Valencia, he did not believe in stop signs. Okay? He would just drive and he would go down 5th Street because we lived there, and he'd be just honking. Everybody yelling, "Hi, Pop." You called him Pop, okay? "Hi, Pop." And that day, I remember, I was already married, and so I still live there where I am now. And he happened to go by, and about a while back, somebody says, Father Valencia just got killed. What happened? He ran the stop sign over there and they hit him. So if he hadn't gotten killed, he'd probably still be there at San Salvador, But he was a very different kind of a person. Yeah, I was always scared of him. He always carried his little varita,
Yes.
stick.
Yeah.
It was called varita.
Yeah.
Little Hey boy, he called you boy. Hey boy, come here, boy. You sit right there, boy. He'd make you kneel. And in those days, you had your little catechism book, the Jesus and I book.
Mhm.
So I was pretty good at memorizing because those were very easy. They would give you the question, give you the answer, you could memorize it.
Mhm.
So if you would sit there, and then you would tell him, he would ask you the question, you give him the answers, ask you about 1 or 2 questions. And, okay, boy, he'd give you a nickel. Well, a nickel was good. And then I would, right there from the church, I would go across the tracks because there was no freeway there. Go on I Street, there was the Kenny Bakery, where there was a donut place. Oh, I used to buy this. I remember this big, the glazed donut for a nickel. That I remember.
Yeah.
With
So Father Valencia was quite a guy.
He was when I got married, okay, I came to see him because, like I said, remember our house burned? So I didn't have the records. You have to have your You have to show your baptism record, you know, that's where I was baptized there. My confirmation record, so I had to come see him about it. And Father, I came to get him, he said, "Por qué, boy? I'll come here, we're not married here." I said, "You know, Father, you know, I can't because she's from Riverside, you know, I have to get married over there." "Okay, come here, boy, let me show you, come here." So he took me in the back, and he had this old refrigerator. It was already, and you know, and he opened it up, and that's where he had the book, where he had all the records, those days, and he had beautiful handwriting. And he says, "Mira, boy, in case there's a fire, nothing will happen to the records." Well, that was a smart thing to do. I'll never forget that.
Also, do you remember who this?
Oh, yeah, oh, yes. Every Easter after Mass, he had this wooden mannequin. And who this is? Judas, okay?
Who betrayed Jesus.
Who betrayed Jesus, okay? So across from the church, there was another building, a 2-story building. So they
little
would run
market,
rope,
yeah, a little market, yeah.
So they would run a rope across, and then they would put him up there, and they would dance him up there, and they would always play for him "Tú ya no soplas," that song, you know, in Spanish. And then they'd light him up, and it'd blow up and all that. But do that every Easter. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Now, let me ask both of you. Growing up in South Colton in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, who were your mentors? Who were your heroes from the community?
Well, there was several people, okay. Number one was my father, okay. The reason I say this is because whenever we used to go out and work, he drove me. I mean, you don't get anything until I see a good day's work. I mean, he would be on me, and at the time, I didn't like it. I hated it. But when you get to growing to an adult, you start forming the same habits that he did. It gave me a good work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me a sense of responsibility, commitment, and that's what I owe him. Okay? The others, well, when you're growing up, you start going into different directions. Like I mentioned, Frankie Muniz.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Our teacher, Spanish teacher.
Spanish teacher. He used to take me
Colton
aside.
High School, yeah.
Yes. In fact, he's the one that got me enrolled in that wrestling program.
Jimmy Alanis.
Jimmy Alanis,
Yeah, Jimmy was
and
a wrestler.
Frankie Bustos.
And Frankie Bustos.
Yeah,
were wrestlers.
we got into that. And he was the one that got me hooked on that. And again, it teaches you a lot of things. He was one of them. And again, I have to mention the group. Remember the Congress of Community Clubs?
Oh, with Manuel Padilla.
Manuel Padilla. And,
Tony Garcia.
Tony Garcia and what's the other the other gentleman?
Angel Oliva.
Oliva. Yes.
Oliva.
They were the ones that took us under their wing and said, okay, we will sponsor you. We will have one of us will always be there to give you advice, whatever you need. And I used to talk to him after the meetings, because we used to meet there at the hall. Our club used to meet at the hall upstairs.
Which hall?
At the
Fidel Hernandez.
Fidel Hernandez.
Veterans. What do they call it? Fidel Hernandez. I can't think of the word.
Yeah.
Veterans League or something.
Post.
The Fidel Hernandez.
Post numbers.
Veterans
also.
Post. Yes.
Yeah.
That's where we used to, and I used to stay after a while and talk with them, and they used to give me some good advice. And then I also used to look up to other guys that I have to mention. You were one of them. Okay? You were one of them because.
Don't say that, Joaquin, because I get watery eyes.
Well,
when
you
say
know,
that.
I have to because your group was always a little older than me, but for some reason, you always used to do things. Boy Scouts, you even had your own little gym, And I used to like that, and then that's why I started. hanging
Willie's
out-
Gym, Willie's
Yeah,
Gym,
I started hanging around with you guys because I liked the things that you did, and you never got into any trouble that I knew of. So again, people that I hang around with, I like it because you learn a little bit from everybody, and it kind of keeps you out of trouble.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I never heard that before by
Oh,
anybody.
Tommy,
Yeah.
anytime I talk about anybody who's, Tommy,
Mm.
because I remember you going with me one time when my car that I drove to school went missing. And it was one of my friends that I used to hang around. I mean, he's the one that took it without asking me. And I found out where he was. So, and I was standing there just dumbfounded, and you came, hey, yeah, what's the matter? I said, well, my car's missing. But I think I know where it is. So he told me, come on, let's go. So you took me, got me in the car, you and Willie and Omar Sosa,
Mhm.
and went up to the guy's house, and we went up there, and he came out to his car, because I knew if I would have been there by myself, I would have gone home without it. I know, and because of you guys over there, they said, well, there it is. He just borrowed it.
Well, thank you so
You know,
much. Thank you.
And I always grateful for that. And that's one of the reasons I hold you as one of my best friends, one of the people that I admire.
Thank you so much. You humbled me.
Well,
And
not
you said-
just because we're here.
No, and you said it in front of my wife, so maybe
Well,
it'll.
really, I know Tommy since high school. In fact, we used to play sport together.
Yes.
For a while.
Yeah. And Tony, what about any mentors or
Well,
heroes?
the person that was my father, okay, because I had him for a very long time. And so, you talked about, you said, well, you were spoiled because I was the only child. That's the good part. The bad part is, if you're an only child, there's a lot of pressure on you. Remember, when there's a lot of children in the family, usually Mexican parents always expect the first child to be perfect, right? But if somehow that child disappoints them, well, they can go on to the second and third and fourth. When you're an only child, there is nobody else. You are expected to be perfect, okay? So there's all this pressure on you, okay? But I always admire my father because like you said, when he wasn't working, he taught himself that how to be a plumber, and wasn't working. Then he learned how to do that and go out and get a job, and I'd go with him, and then this is how we had money, And he always, in fact, he taught me how to drive. I used to drive the car when I was 13 years old. No, 11, with that Model A Ford. I remember I had an old Model A, and we used to go from my house to Steven's store.
Yes.
Okay, and he used to let me drive it from there, and so I was driving since I was 11. We were stopped several times by the Colton Police Department, okay, and Jess Kennedy and those people, but they said, okay, just don't do it again. Okay, we won't do it again. Well, yeah, they caught us about 2 or 3 times, but most of the time, I just drove from there to Stevan's and
Mhm.
places like that. But it's my father.
Esteban was a grocery store.
It was a grocery store, that's where everybody went. There was one there, and then where we lived on Fifth Street, if you went down there, there was like a Jimmy's store. That was more like a beer and wine place. But if you went further down, there was a Trini Bocanegra, he had another grocery store down there on Fifth Street.
Oh, Fifth Street had a liquor store?
Oh, Jimmy's place.
Uh-huh.
It was like a beer and wine place.
And then there was a grocery
And
store
yeah,
there?
further down was the Trini Bocanegra, had that store down there. So,
So your dad was your role model?
he was
your
my
hero?
role model, and other people like, another one that taught me also was Ray Abril Senior.
Ray Abril Senior. Ray Abril
Because
Senior.
he had the Boy Scouts.
Troop 45.
Troop 145. I remember that because I never been out of South Colton, you know, well, that was our life, okay? And joined his troop. He would take us like camping outside of, you know, to San Diego or something like that. My God, to me, that was a million miles away from home. I'd never been there. So that was the people that I can remember that I looked up to.
Yeah. You know, we went over our hour, Frank, but it's been a very interesting conversation. And before we close this afternoon, is there anything else that I forgot or that you recall during our conversation that you would like to share with us?
Well, there's so many things, you know, where do you start? All I can say is my experience in being raised in Colton and South Colton for the most part. It was quite an experience. I mean, you talk about old times, how people lived in the old. Well, Colton, in a way, for some of us, was that way. I mean, we lived in houses where there were no floors. Okay.
Yeah, they have dirt floors.
Yeah, dirt floors. I remember my mom used to wet it down so keep the dust from going on. But you didn't know. I mean, you didn't know whether you were all
of us were poor.
Yeah. At the time, I mean, you know, we thought everything was good as long as the families. I guess as long as the families were there together, everything was well. You didn't know until later on you started going to some other people's houses, which were better than you are. But at the same time, you go back home, it's nothing like home, you know, regardless of the conditions. And then you have your friends that you can always rely on to be there whenever you want to talk to them or you want to. It was a good experience. Personally, for me, it was a good experience. It's made a lot of friends. You meet a lot of kids now that you worked with kids when they were small. They're grown up now. They come up to you and they recognize who you are and they talk to you.
Well, you were a coach. You were also a coach.
I coached for, I don't know, 15, 20 years.
Yes.
You know, until my son grew out of it. That's pretty much when I stopped. But yeah, for many years I worked with Little League kids. And,
cross-country kids with a high school?
Yeah.
Road runners?
Road runners. In fact, we used to meet here at Cal State for our workouts. And we used to run the hills here quite a bit, you know. And we got to where we would go nationally, Albuquerque, other states to run for the national titles, you know. And that was also an experience because you went out of Colton for a little bit. You got to know other places, yes. And from there, you learn a lot. As you grow older, you're still learning, you know, and that's one
So
thing.
Colton was a good foundation for you.
Colton was a very good foundation for us. Yeah, it was.
And Tony,
Really enjoyed it.
anything that I forgot?
No. Yeah, I agree that, you know, a lot of people, as we found out later, was that you guys were poor. But we didn't consider ourselves poor. We didn't. I thought it was, you know, even though it was difficult for some families, but they would manage to get food on the table, yeah. You had a bed to sleep with, maybe you had to sleep with a lot of your brothers in there, but you still had a place to sleep. Like you said, we didn't have a place to go play like a Disneyland, something like that, but we had our sequia, you know?
Yeah.
For us, it was good enough. That's all we needed. So, as you know, Joaquin said, yes, it was a very good experience to be in South Colton, and I don't regret ever being there.
Good.
I would remind Tommy that when we were kids going to grammar school, it was normal to go to school barefooted because you didn't have any shoes.
Right, it was normal.
And nobody said anything
No.
because that's the way things were. Nobody thought, you know, any differently. So that, and like you say, it was a culture shock when we went into junior high.
Well, barefoot and everything,
Yeah.
Frank, a couple of more minutes? let me ask you another question. Joaquin, you were a newbie to Colton,
Mhm.
5 years old, born in Mexico. So when you came to Colton, people didn't accept your family. They ostracized you because you were Mexican.
Yeah. I was also born in Silao, Guanajuato. I'm from there, yeah. But yeah, Tommy is right. When they find out that you're not from here, you get picked on, you get bullied on, and I was telling Tommy that I had my share of fights in grammar school because of kids.
Because of kids.
Yeah, and not only that, but my aunts, Manuela, Carmen, and Jenny, we used to walk to and from school together because there was always somebody waiting for us, you know, especially right over the bridge.
Yeah.
You know, and oh my God, you know, you hated it, you know, and you try to take other roads to home, and the same thing. But you know, that was also an experience. But
So you were just about fighting every day.
when you go to school and they wait for you every day, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, because you were a new one, and you were a Mexican from Mexico.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they grab you and they don't let you go, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, not only me, but my aunts, they had to fight through the same thing.
Uh-huh.
And Carmen was the one she was a feisty one.
She was in my class.
Yeah, she was the one that stood by me.
Uh-huh.
You know, Carmen and Jenny and Manuela they kind of stood off the side, but Carmen was, you know,
Yeah.
gutsy woman, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I wanted to bring that up so it would be part of our taping this afternoon, because I think it's one of the important things that still goes, that's still around, that attitude's
It
still
is.
there.
It's still there.
But like you said, in spite of that, it was a good foundation to grow up with
Yeah.
and be part of, that it gave you that sense of belonging to a community and giving back to a community. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rewarding
Yeah.
to us, you know. It's very rewarding.
Well, Tony, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
And Joaquin, thank you. I thought we were gonna go an hour, we've been an hour and a half.
Well, you know, and we discussed a lot of things, but there's still a lot of things that we discussed that went on the years that we were raised in Colton.
Okay.
You know, you growing up in Colton, you understand, you know.
Right, right.
But we covered a lot of the main.
Well,
things
Joaquin,
that-
if you remember, Tony, if you remember something else, we'll have another taping session. But thank you very much for being with us with the project this afternoon.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure. It was a pleasure for
Thank
me.
you.
You know.